We will get started. Hi, everybody. I'm Devin Waugh, the Instruction Librarian for NC Live. And this panel today is Page Turner's Leisure Reading in Academic Libraries. And our lovely panelists for today, so we have Chris Guy, who is the Student Success and Engagement Librarian at UNC Chapel Hill. We have Morgan Pruitt, who is the Outreach and Assessment Librarian at Central Carolina Community College. And then we have Chris Robinson, who's the Outreach and Engagement Librarian at UNC Wilmington, and Scotty Capel, who is the Scholarly Communications Librarian at Western Carolina University in Cullowhee. And each panelist is now going to share a little bit about the leisure reading collection at their institution. So Chris Guy will start us off.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. Yeah, so just a little bit of background on the leisure collection and services here at UNC Chapel Hill. We have about 2,000 print books, 5,000 ebooks and audiobooks that make up our popular reading collection. We also have, within the wider category of our streaming or our leisure services, streaming and TV, streaming film and TV collection that fits into this wider leisure collection that we try to promote and try to offer here. And so there are just a couple screenshots there talking about our wider leisure collection, and then a shot of our catalog highlighting the popular reading collection.
All right, and now Morgan will share about the leisure reading collection at Central Carolina Community College.
Hi, I'm Morgan, and I'm at Central Carolina Community College. We have some screenshots here of the leisure reading guide. We also have a link to that, and then the leisure reading playlist. Just some videos that we've recorded about the different resources. We actually just got Dogwood Digital here, so that is going to expand the possibilities that we have for leisure reading. The big thing is that we try to provide a lot of resources for how you can find leisure reading. And then we also have a faculty and staff book club, which I'll talk about a little bit later.
All right, and now Scotty is going to share about Western Carolina University.
Hey everyone, I'm Scotty Capel. I'm the Scholarly Communications Librarian at Western Carolina University. We have a small but mighty leisure collection that we would love to expand, but we're kind of at capacity space-wise for our print volumes. And our print leisure section is divided into nonfiction and fiction, but we've recently expanded to grow our ebook offerings and audiobook offerings. And like Chris at UNC, we also have some other materials that we kind of put under that leisure umbrella, including popular films, and now a growing board game collection as well.
All right, and now Chris Robinson from UNC Wilmington will share what the leisure reading's like at Randall Library.
Yes, thank you, Devin. So like leisure reading at Randall Library, it consists of, as you see here, displays, collections, programming, promotions, and outreach. As you can see in our collections area, we do have a new and popular section. And then we recently just added a graphics novel section. But we also have a small foreign language section that is used, but I also feel like it can there's room for growth. And then we do have a children's area that has easy read, young adult books, and just a family friendly section where professors or any campus, anyone on campus can come in and sit in this area and utilize the area, but also the community as well. But I'll dive into a lot of this a little later.
All right, and so our first question is, what programs or initiatives have you implemented in your libraries to encourage leisure reading across campus? What advice do you have for other libraries interested in doing similar programs? And we'll have Morgan start us off with this question.
So we have done a lot of different things. One of the things that we've done is Words on Wheels, which is where we take the books that we think faculty and staff will like around to their offices. And this allows them to sort of visit the library without actually having to go to the library. The library comes to them. And we have also printed out bookmarks and other resources that can be easily shared so that faculty and staff and students can connect with Leisure Reading Collection in that way. And we have also done a few programs for students in particular, where we did something like Cozy Books, Cocoa, and snacks or something like that. I can't remember which order we put it in, but essentially it was just right before the students went home for the winter holidays, and they would come and we would have snacks and coffee. And basically we had posted stickers on books and labels so that people could find things that were based on appeals. So it just made it a shortcut to finding books that they would really like. Probably the most effective thing that we've done, though, is the Faculty Staff Book Club, but it's actually short stories. So what we found was that faculty and staff really love to read, but they did not feel like they had time. And so we pick a different short story for each month, and then we get together on Zoom at 1 p.m. and we just chat about the book. Our campus is unique in the sense that we have 3 main campuses and multiple different satellite sites. And so it's only fair to do it on Zoom so that everyone can attend. We would love at one point to get together in person, but we want as many people as possible to be able to participate. And, you know, with short stories, you don't actually have to like one short story. You can know that next month you'll find something else that you like. A book is a pretty long commitment. And like from my personal perspective, if I were in a faculty staff book club and they said in January, you know, the next 3 months, we're going to read a romance, I'd be like, I'm out. No, thank you. I'm gone. And so a short story really gives people a chance to just spice it up a little bit. And then my advice really would be just try anything and everything. Some of it will work and some of it won't. And just to talk about your collection in a way that is really like loving and exciting. Because I think when you say, if you like something and what you enjoyed about it, then people also get curious about what it is they might want to read. Sometimes people it's not that they don't want to read, it's that there's so much and they're so busy, they're not sure where to start. So if you give them a chance to start somewhere, they can kind of grow.
Are there any short stories from the book club that stand out to you?
Let's see. Edith Wharton, we did Afterward by her. I really liked her because I'd never read her before. But I'll go ahead and say that a lot of times I know that it's common practice to sort of like read a book that you already know, but I don't like doing that. I like to be as surprised as everybody else. So I just pick random short stories, but we get the short stories from a database, Gale, Lit Finder. Go through there and find free short stories that are easily accessible. That way people don't have to pay for them. And we have already, we're already subscribing to the database. So we're using our resources effectively as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Morgan. Any other advice for doing programming around leisure reading from the rest of the panelists?
I can just
Please go ahead, Chris.
okay. Just to throw out there, like some of the programming that we have done that's around leisure reading is like the Banned Books Read-In, and then where we incorporate a class to come in and they share, a banned book that has impacted their lives in some way or another, and then they read the excerpt and then they explain like why this author or this author's writing has impacted their lives. And we also do the same for the African American Read-In. And it's but then the African American read-in is a little bigger because we well, sometimes we take it out into the community and have it, like this year we did it at DC Virgo, a preparatory school here, but in the past we've done it here in the education building. But then it's just getting different people from the community, but also the campus community, student groups, faculty and staff to come and, you know, just celebrate the readings of diverse authors. So that's some of the programming we do at Randall.
We haven't really done any formal programming or initiatives related to our leisure reading collection at Western, but we do promote it really heavily through social media. We have flyers in all of our bathroom stalls. We have themed displays throughout the years. So I think that my advice to others who are interested in bringing in a leisure collection is start where you can. If you don't have the capacity for programming, just try bringing the collection in and doing some passive ways of promoting that. See if it starts to get used, because ideally that's what we want to see is students and our patrons using the book. So if we can do that without doing programming, then that in itself is a success.
Absolutely. All right, we will move on to our next question, which is, how does leisure reading contribute to the overall well-being and academic success of college students? And what evidence or research supports these claims? And Scotty will lead us off with this one.
Sure. So bear with me while I read through my response. I have some numbers here, so I don't want to mix them up as I go along. So I do want to focus on the benefits of recreational reading for reducing stress and increasing empathy. And I am going to start with some statistics. So Devin, if you'd mind advancing. Yep. So in the fall 2023 American College Health Association's National College Health Assessment Undergraduate Reference Group Report, that's a mouthful, I know. This group included data from over 18,000 undergraduates at 38 schools, and 33% of respondents reported that anxiety had negatively affected their performance in a class or delayed their progress toward degree completion in the 12 months prior to the survey. Numbers were similarly high for depression and stress at 23.2% and 40.1% respectively. And the assessment also reported that 22% of respondents often feel isolated and 20.6% of respondents often feel a lack of companionship. So these are pretty sobering numbers, and certainly recreational reading is not the panacea for all stressors that college students face. But there is research that suggests that there is a correlation between leisure reading and a reduction in stress and an increase in empathy, which can then in turn potentially contribute to improved academic success and provide tools for students to connect with others. And I can share some recent research supporting this. Devin, if you'd advance, please. So in a 2022 article, Levine et al. Detailed their longitudinal survey looking at the benefits of recreational reading on the mental health of 231 students at a large Canadian university. And in their results, they state recreational reading was associated with decreased anxiety and depressive symptoms over the course of the school year when controlling for baseline anxiety and depression. These results are reaffirmed by Brookbank 2023, who studied the leisure reading habits of undergrads at 10 universities across the US and UK. And when asked why they read recreationally, 28 responses from over 98 interviews pertain to relaxation and mental health, with specific mentions of alleviation of anxiety, depression, and stress. Similarly, 36 responses also noted self-improvement as a motivating factor for reading recreationally, and included in this category were perceived social benefits such as improving interactions with others and broadening perspectives. And Dewan 2023 expands on the idea of leisure reading as an empathy-building mindfulness activity, positing that through their engagement with literary characters, students can redirect thoughts from self to others, can experience new ways of thinking, and can gain awareness of challenges faced by others. So within the factors that a student can actually control, and in combination with other self-care activities, recreational reading does have the potential to have a positive effect on a student's relationship with himself, with others, and in their college experience.
All right, I'm going to go back to the question for other panelists to chime in. So any thoughts on leisure reading contributing to well-being and academic success?
I know for us, we like to focus on helping the whole student. And so, yes, we're here to provide them everything they need for their academic journey. But, also there are things that happen along that journey that, cause stress or that can, you know, mess with someone's well-being. And so we try to uh, promote leisure reading as one avenue to help with stress reduction and things like that, but then also just promoting or bringing other non-traditional things into the academic setting, such as creating certain spaces, that are conducive to leisure reading and pointing people in that direction. It's like, okay, yeah, do you need to take a pause? We have this space that you can go read, meditate, do all these different things.
Right, and your Randall Library's done a lot of wellness programming, kind of beyond just leisure reading, right?
Yeah, I run a mindfulness series in our retreat and wellness space. It's called Retreat at Randall. And the series is called Keeping Grounded, the mindfulness series. And so like we've done like sound meditation, shell painting, crocheting, gratitude in every stitch type things. And so we offer those to the students as well.
Great. All right. I am going to jump into that next question, which is question number 3. So, in what ways can academic libraries enhance their collections and services to better support leisure reading among college students, especially considering diverse reading interests and preferences? And for this question, Chris Robinson's going to lead us off.
So for this one, I kind of looked at what we do here at Randall, but then also there are additional strategies that can be used. So it's not just a one size fits all. But how Devin mentioned, like I think one of the best places to start out is like assessing your collection. And if you realize that your collection isn't diverse enough, then that's a starting point to, think about, okay, what are the materials that I need to add? Or how do I make my collection representative of the student body that I serve? But then also some other promotional things that you can do is curate themed displays, um, or curate LibGuides. Or one thing that we do here at Randall is we have LibGuides that we curate, but then we also use Padlet to give a more visual, where we can have the book cover at a decent size, and this person can click the link and it will redirect to the catalog, and you sign in with your UNCW credentials, and then you have access to that, whatever e-book or e-material that is. But then also another thing is enhancing digital and audiobook collections, thinking about students on the go. Here, I really think a lot about commuter students. Like that's where I'm do a lot of the marketing here. Like, if you are in between classes or, have that ride home, here is, audiobooks or other digital resources. But then another thing is leisure reading programming, like I mentioned, the read-ins. But well, it's a program, but also a collaboration. And before I get into that, collaboration is a another avenue like working with other groups. And so in this particular program / collaboration is with the New Hanover County Public Library. We saw that there were just some things in our catalog that we did not have available. But we looked and saw that our public library had those items. So then it kind of clicked with us to say, hey, let's invite the public library to host in the library and offer public library cards for faculty and staff on campus. And so far, we've done that 3 times, and we have combined, we've had over 60 people just come through and just sign up for library cards. So in a way, yes, students are doubling their resources, but it's also increasing what they have access to far as leisure reading. But then, of course, there's the marketing and promotion. Like I mentioned, the LibGuides and the Padlets and things like that. Using QR codes to link back to those, placing them throughout the library, but also placing them at the book display. And let's see, what else? As far as promotion too, like social media, we use Bookface to, promote certain books. And so whatever the theme is for that particular Friday, we'll do our best to find a book and then share out that a little bit about that book and then also mention where someone can find it if they're looking for it. And as I mentioned earlier too, about creating flexible spaces. Here we have like the retreat, but then we also have some other like just little nooks and crannies that you can say, oh, this is a really quiet space. If you're looking for just somewhere to read, you can go here or you can go there. So just being able to direct your patrons to those areas that are for leisure reading. And but then also one of the biggest things is just always ask your audience or your student population, what do you want? Like what do you find interesting? I guess in that moment you can use a little reader's advisory or do the reference interview with some students to see like, how do we make the collection a collection that you want to use? And so like those are just some simple strategies that can be implemented to increase leisure reading and to promote leisure reading at academic libraries.
Awesome. And you mentioned the book face thing.
Mhm.
And is that what I think it is, where it's the cover
Right.
is
So
like mirroring?
uh-huh. So like down, if you see where it says like new and popular in the graphic novels, there's 2 of the like book face pictures. And
Yeah, I
so
see.
this is ones where they actually use the whole bodies or the heads. But when we have some other ones where, it's like half face and, couples, things like that.
Okay. So you're like strategically placing certain books like that. Okay.
Mhm.
Very cool. Nice. Any other thoughts from the panel on facilitating diverse reading interests? Let me head back here.
I would just love to echo getting that firsthand feedback directly from your audience. In addition to like asking kind of like in the moment, I know we've had good success. If we're doing like orientation tabling, sometimes we'll have like just pen and paper where people can jot down like best book you've read over the summer, or best book you've read in high school or in the past year. So anything that can maybe spark that conversation, because that allows us to not only get their take, what they were reading and what's on their mind, and then also helps us kind of open the door for a conversation around like our leisure collection. So like, yeah, because we'll try and acquire that, or we actually have that in our collection already. So kind of planting that seed, but then also looking for more additional content to add in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a nice way to find out like what series are popular among an incoming class or authors and kind of build programming around or find recommendations based on those titles. We also had a question come in chat earlier that kind of relates to this question. I think Nia was asking for any recommendations on how to promote graphic novels and manga.
I would say, because this is actually something that um, I will be starting next semester. We, due to student demand, we have recently increased our graphic novel collection. It used to be really small, but now it covers 2 shelf ranges because they just went on this buying spree of graphic novels. And so I've been trying to figure out like ways to promote it. Um, of course, I will do like the social media, like picking books and just highlighting them. But I also considered asking students for recommendations and if we had those titles within the system or within our catalog, then promoting those titles that students have said these were great graphic novels. Um, but then I also thought about um, reaching out to various clubs and organizations that have anything to do with graphic novels, um, manga, anime, like just to see like, are you all interested, and just market to them and just see what happens. Um, and then I think, well, it was also teaming up with like the digital makerspace. And whenever they have events and things, maybe having flyers or posters around that says, um, for just being on the spot, but like leisure reading at your library. And maybe that particular one is focused on graphic novels, and then a QR code that links to the materials and things like that. But I am still in the process of looking for like creative ways to spark that. So I'm still working on it, but those are some ideas that I've had.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts on graphic novels and manga before we jump into question 4? All right. So question 4 is, how can academic librarians collaborate with other campus stakeholders, such as faculty, student organizations, or counseling services, to promote a culture of leisure reading across campus? And with this question, Chris Guy is going to start us off.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I wanted to also just acknowledge and kind of echo some of what's been said before when it comes to any of these kind of strategies or opportunities to branch out. Like I think it was Morgan mentioned earlier, starting where you can is really important. And with that, I want to also acknowledge that I'm one of a small set of staff here at UNC Chapel Hill who are working on managing, promoting, and kind of getting the word out related to our leisure collections. And I think that is also kind of worth pointing out there. But just starting where you can, whether you have your one-person show or you've got a few other folks or even student staff or students on your campus, student orgs that may be interested in helping with this work. But in terms of, and Devin, if you want to advance to the next slide there. Yeah, in terms of one place to start thinking about collaborations, we've touched on this, I think, in a few places, but really getting out to folks that you might want to work with or thinking about voices you want to hear from or see reflected in your collections. So I've got one example just from collaboration with the Latinx Center here on campus around, Latin Heritage Month, but particular Affinity Month or Heritage Month. You may think about contacting your group, contacting that group or center or department, what have you, asking for recs, right? So what voices or what materials have you really loved? to see what we already have and highlight that. But then if there's budget, if there's space and bandwidth and everything, using any of those recommendations to influence future purchases, and then turning around and saying, hey, we thank you for that feedback. We've actually gone ahead and added that to the collection in the tier. You can check it out now, or you can share it with a friend or your colleague there. And I'll touch on this just a little bit now and then talk a little bit more about cross promotion, but it may be a little bit hard to see on the one screenshot. But thinking about your groups that you're working with, especially if it's around like an affinity month or a celebratory month for a particular population, recognizing that they probably also have some stuff going on, or it's a busy time for them, or they have things that they want to promote and kind of share. So we sometimes will, in our through our Overdrive website, try and link out to things that they have that this particular group has to share. And so we'll try and do that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. I've also really enjoyed getting out to staff wellness events or graduate student resource fairs. So these are informal ways to really make small plugs. The point of the library's tabling at this event isn't necessarily all about the leisure collection. Could be about our services in general, but often there's a way to maybe make that small plug, mentioning that we have this leisure service. So here's the books, or here's information on it, sharing any resources that you have that you're comfortable, sharing with folks, and then making even connections like, tying it back to prior library experience or cross promoting with public libraries. Hey, if you have the Libby app from your public libraries, or you use that before, we actually have that here at UNC Chapel Hill, and it's a really similar process. You'd be able to get signed up really easily with your credentials and then access that for you, for your family, things like that. And talking about family and talking about, whether it's like a HR type, staff wellness events, I've gone to some of those, or a grad student kind of resource fair, campus resource fair, making those connections or making it clear for folks that the materials are there for you and or your family, right? So if you have, I think some of us on the call here mentioned like children's books, or books for teens, right? Young adult fiction, young adult nonfiction, things like that. Making sure that that connection is crystal clear for folks, because it's there for the wider audience. I also think in terms of cross promotion, whenever there's that potential, if you're working with a group, to try and see where you can add to what they're already doing, in addition to like, hey, can you give us some recommendations, or would you mind sharing this resource with your population? So one example of that was our recent collaboration and conversation with UNC Soul. So this is the student organization for undergraduate literature. So this is a student group whose goals really align with what we're trying to do with our leisure collection, right? But just promoting this culture and really community around reading and conversation around reading and wellness that way. So they're trying to raise awareness about what they got going on. And so one of the things we wanted to do was help with that by they tabled at a student org fair. So students who are new to campus come check out all the different clubs that they can sign up for. And we were able to share materials about our collections there. So like, hey, if you're interested in joining, Soul, maybe you can also check out some of these resources that are offered through the UNC libraries, right? Free of cost, free to you. So you can get plugged into some of those books that you might want to check out just for fun. So we've worked on that with them. We've talked about, some longer term projects, but even again, getting a curated list or, recommendations from them that we can then promote to help them facilitate their book club kind of conversations that they were going to be scheduling or working on in the future. That's something that we've been able to do. One of the last things that I'll kind of talk about here, and this is something that's kind of in the works, but something I'm excited about, is through conversations with a staff member who oversees peer mentoring here through our Office of Student Success. When I was first meeting with them, talking to them about different aspects of my work, I mentioned our leisure resources, and they were actually really interested in learning more about that, and then getting plugged in to getting our resources about the leisure collection plugged into training materials, onboarding, right? Going back to Scotty's research and the stats around mental health and wellness and the impact, the health benefits that our recreational reading habits can have on our students. Our mentors who are trying to work with students, help them navigate their experience in college, things like that. Maybe they're looking for ways to help their mentees de-stress, take a break, kill time if they've got a long wait for the bus or a long commute during a holiday or something like that. Right. So looking to kind of not necessarily be the only voice that can communicate what we have going on to promote that wider emphasis on leisure reading, but getting it to folks who are more plugged in with the population that we're interested in connecting with, right? That work is still ongoing, like I mentioned, but I'm pretty excited to see where that goes, especially as the new cohort of peer mentors gets together this fall. But yeah, I think that's the gist of it there.
Yeah, that's such a fantastic way to have students leading that conversation and them kind of being the ones to say it rather than you or, staff always recommending things. I'm going to head back to the question page. Morgan, Scotty, Chris, any other thoughts on working with student orgs, faculty, other campus partners to promote leisure reading?
I guess I have one thing to echo Chris on and then one thing to add. I found it very helpful to connect with the cultural centers here for multiple reasons. One is just to have a presence as a librarian in those spaces and to let the students in those spaces know that you do have a librarian, and I'm here to support you in any way that I can. But then also when it comes to like curating um leisure reading for the different cultural centers, asking them what they want alleviates a lot of pressure off me, because I don't want to just pick or assume like, oh, this is a good title or that's a good title. I'd rather them say like, here's 20 books that we have collectively put together, and we saw that the library like does not have those in the collection, and then I'm like, okay, yes, we'll get those purchased. And so, like I said, definitely if you do have cultural centers, like get to know them, ask them what they want, what they need from you, and especially in the aspect of leisure reading. And then the other thing I would add is just another outreach opportunity. If your institution has any like lifelong learning programs, or we have a place or an institute here called Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, and I think it's for people who are 65 and older. And they come to UNCW. They take different classes. They have workshops and things. But recently, I found out that they are interested in a lot of the leisure reading activities and programs that we do at UNCW, and they had never been like formally invited to either attend or to participate. And so once I found that out, it's just started to reach out to them more and to build that connection. And this past February, when we had the African American read-in, we had 4 members from the Lifelong Learning Institute, participate as readers in the event. So, look at all of your opportunities far as collaborations, and even look at the ones that may be unique, or ones that are not typical to libraries, because if there's a connection and you can build it out, then it's like, why not go for it if you get the approval to do so?
Yeah, that's such a great point. I believe UNC Asheville also has a similar program. I think they call it OLLI, but they also work with seniors and have classes. And they've also reached out to, excuse me, NC Live about collections, Hoopla, our homegrown collection as well. Any other thoughts on partners? before we
Yeah, if
head
I
into
can
Q&A? Yeah.
echo something Chris said earlier about getting students involved in the promotion of leisure collections and leisure reading. I think that that makes a world of difference. It's a lot different for students to hear from their peers than from faculty or staff. So for example, in our library, we have a dedicated display where honors college students periodically curate essentially an exhibit for the library, and quite often they're pulling from our leisure collection, and I think it's really exciting for students to see what their peers are reading, and I think it carries a little bit of a different weight.
All right, now we're going to switch gears and have Q&A. So I will read out questions from the chat. And folks, I'll give you some time as well. We have a question from Nia asking who uses Novelist, and I want to turn that to the panelists as well. Do you all use Novelist for your leisure reading collections?
You know, I will say I have on several occasions, but then also, you know, I use a bunch of resources, different book reviews, journals, websites that has like, you know, credible recommendations and things like that. But yeah, I have used Novelist before.
I don't use it very often in my collection development, but I do use it pretty regularly with patrons who may be requesting titles in areas I'm not quite familiar with, so it can help me make some recommendations in those areas.
Yeah, sort of similar here. So one of the things I could have mentioned at the top, one of the things that is kind of folded within our leisure collection services is our recommendation forms or recommendation service that we offer, both for books, and then there's a similar form for movies and film. So, you know, people can fill out a form letting us know that they want, you know, some book recs, and that Novelist becomes a really powerful tool for the staff that are on the back end, kind of getting those form or recommendation requests. And so it's been helpful in that way, especially if it's something that's a little bit outside of my either, you know, academic or personal area of expertise. So I think it comes in handy for like that kind of reader's advisory in a pinch, at least in my experience.
Morgan, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I use it mostly in recommending books to students, not so much for collection development.
Mm-hmm. Great. So we have a question from Christina. I am based at a commuter campus that offers 2-year degrees and has a large percentage of dual enrollment students. Do you have any strategies or suggestions for promoting leisure reading to students in this environment?
I have to say the thing that I have found most effective is actually word of mouth. Like if I see a student sitting and reading, I'm like, oh my gosh, what's that? What are you reading? And they'll, you know, kind of talk about it. And if they're like, I wish I could be reading something else, then we say, oh, well, you know, we have this reading recommendation form that you can fill out. And I also will, you know, if I have my book, then I'll say, look, I'm reading this. So I have found it's most effective to just be super friendly, ask lots of questions about what they're reading, and then share what you have. Because I have found that students are quite busy and they don't have as much time as I maybe felt like they had previously. I don't really know. That's probably just a misconception, but being a little bit less come to this activity and more like, what are you doing right now? How can we sort of meet you there?
Can
Yeah,
I
that's a
say
great approach.
something?
Oh, yeah.
Hi, my name is Bridget Sanders and I'm from UNC Charlotte. And several years ago, what we did is we went to our library administration with a case for promoting more leisure reading, including popular DVDs. And we asked for a budget to purchase leisure reading and popular DVDs, and we were granted that funding. And it is a permanent part of our regular budget. It's not a lot. It's like I think $1,000 each. So popular reading gets $1,000. The popular DVDs get $1,000, and that is how we are able to fund those collections every year. So maybe if you could, other libraries could go to their administration and make a case. We used articles that promoted leisure reading for college students, etc., and we were granted that funding.
Yeah, and that kind of goes hand in hand with a question from Teresa asking, how do you acquire leisure books? Do you all have budgets, or do you use a leasing system like McNaughton Books? Do you weed? What are some of the specifics of how you all have acquired and managed your collections?
I will say I want to think about leisure reading from a big framework, which is that like we tend to think about popular books like fiction as leisure reading, but someone could think of leisure reading as anything that they want to read that they're interested about, but it doesn't relate to their schoolwork. So it could be nonfiction, and it could be something that you know, might seem very dry, but is still leisure reading. So thinking broadly about, could it still support the curriculum and still be reflective of what you need to purchase, but might be leisure reading? Maybe it's a New York Times bestseller, but it's not a textbook. So thinking pretty broadly about how you promote leisure reading and how you think about purchasing can really give you some flexibility, even if you don't have all the money allocated to popular reading. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's sort of what I think about is when I purchase the books, keeping it broad.
We do have a budget for our leisure collection at Western. Each leisure area, from our nonfiction leisure collection to the various sub-collections within our leisure fiction collection, gets a small annual allocation. We also have our leisure collection built into our collection development policy.
Yeah, and I would say the same as Scotty. Ours is built into our collection development policy. And then also all liaisons of subject specialists, they have a budget, and they have a and they can pick and choose or meet with professors and things like that to determine what to purchase. But then me as outreach and engagement, I am a liaison, but just to non-academic departments. So there is money in a budget for me. So if let's say the Asian Heritage Cultural Center, they reached out and says, okay, we were trying to find books, but there are not enough titles with Asian voices. Then I could easily take that list to our collections development person and just say, hey, I met with this group. They recommended these books, and then kind of hand it off. And then after that, I'll get her like a little note or type of report that says these items was purchased. And then I'll share that with the cultural center so they'll know that it just didn't go into their request didn't go into a black hole. You know, it's something actually happened and came from it.
Yeah, and then on our end, I think largely similar to what other folks had mentioned, our print collection, my understanding, don't quote me on this, my understanding is that we have a range of the kind of popular bestsellers that we're releasing. And so it's more of that type of arrangement where books will kind of cycle in and cycle out. For our ebooks and audiobooks, I believe, at least initially, some of our like our Libby collection or our Overdrive collection started through our student library advisory board and funding that was received through that. So that may be a slightly different way of going about it, is thinking about external funding sources there. But yeah, folks have more specific questions about that, I can follow up with you.
And one thing that has worked really well for us is we have a committee, Popular Reading and DVD Committee. And we meet monthly when we need to for updates or recommendations or issues that are arising. And that has really helped us to develop a really good collection of popular reading and DVD. And then we do promotions around specific months or seasons. Like we've for like August/September, we developed and sent out messaging about a collection that concerns college students or going back to school or anything like that. Halloween we've addressed with books, you know, that are scary or Halloweenish. So to get more promotion, we've done things with our books, with promoting our leisure reading.
Yeah, that's a great point, Bridget. One thing that, and it goes in hand with kind of like policy and building out that organizational commitment to leisure reading. We had a question come in from registration. What should our mission statement look like when we start to promote leisure reading? And that could be a question about policy or getting that buy-in on an organizational level about this topic. Panelists, do you all have thoughts on that?
I think it like goes back to what Bridget had said earlier. Like if your organization doesn't have a leisure reading section or needs to expand, then you know, create a case, create a proposal, take it to leadership, because I think the biggest part is getting that buy-in. And it's like once you show that value, um, and get that buy-in, then you're able to, purchase the materials, promote that collection and do those things like that. I know for me, prior to me moving into this position, a lot of this stuff was already embedded into the library's organization, the whole culture. And so it was just easy for me to just pick up and either enhance or expand. But I do think it starts with stating the case, especially with administrators or leadership.
Double down on you, Christopher, with that. You actually need to get buy-in from the leadership in the library. And one thing that we kind of stressed is that we did not want this to come out of our subject specialist budgets. It needed to be a separate budget because, as we know, funds are tight across all disciplines, and some disciplines cost more for their books, of course, the STEM stuff, but we still wanted to collect any popular reading that dealt with that. And so we had to make a case again to the leadership, library leadership, to actually fund those separate from the subject specialists. And it was an easy sell because there are articles out there that speak about leisure reading for college students. And so we were lucky, I guess, in a sense, that our leadership agreed with us and was able to fund it. Again, it's not much, but it goes a long way. The committee, and it's two separate committees. The popular reading has its set of librarians and staff, actually, that make those decisions of what to buy. And then the popular DVDs subcommittee has its own separate folks who decide which DVDs to purchase within the confines of the funds that we have. And actually, it works out very, very well because we do get quite a few books from the New York Times bestseller list automatically within our collection development process. But it's those that are outside of those that we tend to purchase. And I'm not on the popular reading one, so I'm trying to speak for them. But I know the process that they use. I'm on the popular DVD side of it. And we are quite up to date on what movies come out and when they come out, and we are on it within a month. So
Nice. Thanks for sharing that. We have a question from Casey and also Katie about how do you interest busy students in reading, but also even participating in book clubs. And I see our panelists have replied to some of those chats by sharing that audiobooks are great. Also just encouraging students when they feel like they have more time, like during breaks, spring break, fall break, holiday, summer, or long commutes to and from campus. And then somebody shared in terms of book clubs, keeping them on a virtual platform, which is what Morgan mentioned at the beginning of the panel. Any other thoughts on reaching busy students?
I think for me, it's what I'm about to say is just very general and just a lot of things that I do. But it's just meeting the student, no matter where, like, no matter if they are a full-time on-campus student, a commuter student, a transfer student. It's again just meeting them where they are. And just asking those questions, well, maybe you don't maybe you don't have time right now, but do you feel like you'll have time to read over spring break, fall break, winter break? If they say yes, find out what they like to read and show them where the section is if they have time. But yeah, for me, it's just always just assessing the situation and then doing my best to meet the student or just the patron where they are.
All right. Now we have a minute left, and the interest in ending on time. What I'll do is share, folks, Thank you so much for attending. I forgot to mention at the top, this is a webinar in our month-long marketing and social media series that we are hosting. We have 2 other webinars happening in the series, one on Thursday. It's a programming panel with librarians from public and academic libraries. And then next week, I'll be leading a webinar on using Social Explorer, which is one of our new resources for marketing to patrons. All right, and thank you so much, panelists, for sharing your expertise. We will wrap up. I really appreciate y'all taking the chance to share what you're doing on your campuses. And folks, keep an eye out for that email tomorrow morning with a link to the slides so you can see all the great examples that panelists shared and the recording and the feedback survey. With that feedback survey, please let us know what you liked, what topics you'd like to see NC Live cover in the future, if you want us to focus more on leisure reading, or share some of the great displays and examples from libraries around North Carolina, please let us know. We really appreciate that feedback. All right, everybody. And like I said, I kept my promise. We will wrap